Mike McCarthy joining us here on the home of the Cowboys, 105.3 The Fan. Oh, sorry, Netflix star Mike McCarthy joining us on 105.3 The Fan. Good morning, Coach. How are you?
Doing well. Good morning, everyone. Netflix fan.
Yeah. I mean, I watched you in the 3-part, Aaron Rodgers documentary. The Cowboys Netflix trailer dropped yesterday. Which one would you like to start off with first?
Oh, no, I'll just get ready to beat the Buccaneers.
Did you watch any of the Rodgers stuff, or did your phone blow up when it was released the other day? I thought it was really good.
I have not seen it, but I have some friends that have watched it, and it sounds like they did a really nice piece on Aaron.
Coach, a lot of things that current Jets teammates said, I kind of felt through the documentary of whatever off-the-field stuff never seemed to really affect his leadership within. I thought it was interesting. You said every meeting had to start with a current events topic, and that always kept things a little bit different and unique. Is that true? Whatever Aaron's off-field interests were didn't really affect him inside the building and the work ethic and his effect as a leader?
No, absolutely. And frankly, the current events is something that, I've always been a part of. I learned it from our old offensive line coach, Alex Gibbs, used to do with the offensive lineman back in the 90s. And so that's a pretty common practice in the quarterback meeting rooms that I've been involved in. But what was really cool about Aaron has a very eclectic, range of interest, and is always very well read, and it was the current events was always a fun time to start the day.
To that point, Coach, about being very well read, you said in there that one of the things you always loved about him was he'd have an opinion, but it was always well researched and had juice behind it. In the Cowboys locker room right now, is there anyone that impresses you in that same sort of way, just being, somebody who's really sharp and well researched and has that kind of an eclectic personality?
Oh, definitely. To be honest with you, I think the majority of them do. I think that's just today's generation. I think just the way, and I experience it with my own children, having children range from, age 13 to 33. So I just think the way, these young people grow up today and the exposure that they have with the internet so I'd say most of our players. I mean, you walk by the locker room at any given time when the majority of the team's in there, it's buzzing. And so I think that's a very, very common personality trait in NFL locker rooms.
Coach, talk about the I want to know about the X's and O's. It seems like, Rodgers is a guy who goes in there, wants to know the why, has his own ideas. Rajon Rondo was a guy in basketball. Sandler was reminding me what a big hoops guy you were over here. Rondo, everyone said, could be a coach. Who is someone with the Cowboys you've been around where you're like, okay, this football intellect, this guy could be a coach, or, X's and O's, he has it mastered? Is there someone who jumps out?
Oh, yeah. You can start in the quarterback room. I just think the training that these quarterbacks go through, if they're stupid enough to go into coaching, I'm just kidding. But their education is one of a kind. But yeah, there's always players that you look at and you say, boy, he'd be a hell of a coach. C.J. Goodwin would be a guy, definitely, because where he is in his career, and just he has such a great story and a diverse background playing offense, defense, and is obviously an unbelievable special teams coach and a special teams player. I think that's where he would really excel as a coach. Brock Hoffman's definitely a guy you would say, growing up in a coach's family. And I think, Will Greer coaches kids, you definitely can see, that they look at it differently and understand the backstory of what goes into everything. I think sometimes when you're a young player, I don't think you realize how much it goes into it, because that's why these coaches work the hours that they do.
Mike McCarthy here on 105.3 The Fan with Sean, Bobby, and Jared. To the Netflix Cowboy thing, did you notice cameras around? Was it like some of the past experiences of Hard Knocks and All or Nothing? Well, that was with Jason with Amazon, but we were there at training camp with all the Hard Knocks cameras. Was there anything similar to that? Did you have to change the way you did things because of what's coming out next year?
I wouldn't say change. This is clearly, an experience working for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know if you can have any more cameras than we do have. I mean, our internal operation is it's a well equipped department. So yeah, one thing I would say, 'cause I'm not a fan of it, but you do get used to it working here. So I think Netflix just kind of blended right in, frankly.
Well, look, as soon as you talk about all that stuff here, I relived and was reminded the Favre Rodgers stuff, where Aaron said Mike brought me in the truck, told me what was happening, and the helicopters. You haven't had any helicopters flying around except for Jerry's around here like you had Favre watch, though, so that's good.
Yeah, this is definitely the closest I've ever been to a helicopter. It was cool to fly in on one. So that was a different experience. Especially for being a young coach. I mean, that was going into my third year, and in the handbook they give you, Head Coach 101 handbook, there's definitely was not a chapter in there about handling that situation. So yeah, that was a very different experience. But I do really appreciate it even more. I think Aaron was put in a very tough situation, and I thought he handled it extremely well.
Yeah. Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy joining us here on 105 through the Fan. Coach, Jerry gave a lot of praise on Tuesday when he was speaking with us. Gave a lot of praise to Cooper Rush, getting the run game into optimal matchups at the line of scrimmage. Could you just talk about how Cooper's progressed on that front and how comfortable he is at the line of scrimmage right now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to have it in today's game. There's so much that goes on at the line of scrimmage. There's so much that goes on with your cadence. Defenses are holding the skies longer than ever. It's a very, very common to see things held to the snap of the ball, particularly with the safeties. So it's a very big part, not only the run game, but also the protection, adjustments. And he's exceptional. He does an excellent job of that, and keeps us in favorable plays.
On that front, just the idea of work being done by the quarterback, pre-snap, how do you guys prevent defenses from getting a beat on your language and your communication? Is it common practice to have language that varies week to week, or dummy calls, or is it something where those signals and that language has to be consistent for the continuity of the offense? Oh,
absolutely. I mean, you're always adjusting your language. You're very, very aware. We watch the TV copies, as far as our game analysis process, no different than the defenses watches the offense watches the defense. So self-scout to me is something that I think you cannot spend enough time on, whether it's the players watching themselves, making sure they clearly identify what they're putting on film, particular techniques, stance adjustments, all those things. So yeah, that's the real detail of winning at the line of scrimmage. So I mean, frankly, every time we have a walkthrough, that when we break, we have a signal session, because that's something that's very, very fluid, and you're always changing and adjusting.
Coach, there was a time where Baker Mayfield's career felt like it was kind of teetering on the brink. He had gone through a couple different teams and was having some struggles, but he and the Buccaneers have proved to be a really strong match. What appears to have clicked for him as a quarterback?
Well, I mean, you're talking about a young man that's played a ton of football, Heisman Trophy winner, played at a very high level. First pick in the draft, and that's always a tough place to be, because I mean, there's a reason you're the first pick in the draft. I mean, you go to a team that's obviously has the worst record in the league. So I just think the experience that he's had at every stop has really served him well, because you can see it in the way he plays. I mean, he plays with great command, confidence, and that's something that is one of the first things I look for in his personality and his approach. And he's playing at a really high level, very comfortable in that scheme. And I think all those experiences that he's had, Carolina, the Rams, obviously Cleveland, has served him well.
Mike, Jared Sandler here, Packers fan. Want to thank you for some great years. Really appreciate it. From a quarterback standpoint, if you're drafting a quarterback and you can only have one, and I know that this is kind of an unrealistic hypothetical, but you got either a quarterback with great physical tools who lacks on the mental side, or the other way around, whether, mental side leadership, but then also the X's and O's stuff that we were talking about earlier. Which is more coachable or teachable? Which side would you rather have already versus have the opportunity to grow in a quarterback?
I think just in general terms, and it's really any position, but specific to the quarterback position, I think you have to look at, their profile and say, hey, what does he have that you can't teach, and what doesn't he have that you can't teach? That's usually the line that I think draws it. Because what I've found in my career is some of these young men, based on their background, really how much did they play in college at the quarterback position, and they may get tagged in their evaluation processes. Their learning may not be as good, and that's why you have to go work out quarterbacks. You got to see them throw. You got to stand right next to them. I think it's a difficult skill set to evaluate if you don't see them live. And I think it's the same thing in the mental part of it, because I've had the experience where you've questioned a guy's mental capacity, and then you find out, man, this guy's really bright, but his communication skills is not top notch. It just needs some work. It's like when you have a Pittsburgh accent. I mean, you got to work through those. I think you clearly got to identify that mental part, because that's something that takes time, and it takes the one-on-one time. And as we all know in all sports, the evaluation process sometimes doesn't give you that one-on-one opportunity to get in the classroom and really dissect those guys. So, but you can't teach 6'4", great escape ability and throw the ball to the moon. I mean, that's you're not going to change that in the classroom.
Do you know, and maybe the transfer portal stuff hasn't been around in its current form long enough, but have you noticed with quarterbacks who bounce around and maybe they enter the draft having played for, say, 3 different programs, that their fluency is less or maybe more because they get 3 different perspectives, or maybe they don't get to spend 3 or 4 years really learning one system? I imagine when you first started coaching and talking to these kids, it just wasn't nearly as common to talk to guys that had as many stops prior to the draft as now.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think we're kind of early in the evaluation mode there, just because it hasn't been around long enough. But I think, like anything, clearly there's pros and cons to it. But I think there will, in my opinion, will end up being more pros, because I think anytime you can increase opportunity and experience, it brings a wealth of value to any individual, especially at the quarterback position. So I would think that these the majority of these young men they're leaving for an opportunity to play, because it's been proven just the number of reps that college quarterbacks play in their college experience really helps them at this level. And I think it's going to be even more important, because just take the off-season program in the NFL. You don't have the reps in the spring, the summer, and training camp and preseason games that you had 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and so and you got more scheme in today's game. So the experience level that these young men are getting at college, I think it's vital. So I think that in itself is a positive. But you're worried about the emotional part of it too. Is he leaving for an opportunity to play, or is he leaving because he wants a fresh start because of other things? So there's a lot there to evaluate. But I think clearly, someone trying to go get more experience at the quarterback position, I think it'll definitely benefit. Would benefit them and help them be better prepared for the NFL.
Coach, great chat as always. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing some of your TV stardom with us, and happy holidays, man. We appreciate you.
You bet. Happy holidays, everybody. Take care.